Good day, everyone, and thank you for joining Crank Software's Inside the GUI series. As part of our customer case study sessions, today we're talking about an important GUI project we did with Ventec Life Systems, manufacturers of integrated medical solutions for respiratory care. Recently, Ventec decided to use Crank Storyboard to support the update and evolution of their VOCSN critical care ventilator product. Joining me today to discuss this exciting project are Jason Clark, VP of Sales at Crank Software, and Toma Fletcher, VP of Research and Development at Crank Software. Good day, gentlemen.
Hey, Roy.
So thanks for joining us. First of all, we'll start with you, Jason, just to give everyone an overview what the project was like. Can you describe what Ventec was looking for and what they were trying to accomplish when they came to Crank?
Yeah, Ventec was building a medical device. It's their VOCSN product. The VOCSN is 5 devices in one, so it's pretty revolutionary, but it's very similar to what we're seeing happen in a lot of the medical fields these days. You know, people are trying to build a device that has more functionality, brings different things together, offers a richer display and user interface. The main piece that the VOCSN does is the V is for ventilator, and there's also other pieces inside of there is oxygen, cough, suction, and nebulization. All these different features, which would have been 5 different devices in before this device, and it would have caused a lot more devices in the room. It'd be a lot bigger and not as portable and not as functional. So it's a really interesting device. They've been using us for quite a few years now, and they're bringing this out to a larger base of users with it. At the onset of the pandemic, as we all know, there was a concern that there's a shortage of ventilators in the world. So the U.S. government went out and tried to find different people to help fill this, and so Ventec was selected as the provider to use GM as the manufacturer to create these updated ventilators. And with Storyboard, they were able to easily optimize the UI for this new use case and build scenario to help them get through this scenario.
Thanks, Jason. And Toma, Jason brought up a few points there, which would be good to get your thoughts on. First of which being, a company decides to iterate and update and evolve their GUI to meet a market need, and obviously they don't want to spend a lot of time doing that. Can you talk a little bit about how Crank and Crank Storyboard helps facilitate that sort of rapid evolution of GUIs?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things we like to concentrate on is the fact that you want the right people building the right aspects of the product. And that's really important if you're looking to move fast, if you're looking to kind of iterate your product through a number of different design iterations. You want to make sure that all aspects of the product are moving forward, kind of in parallel rapidly. And that means, having your engineers focus on the engineering aspect of the product, the lower level, the hardware connections. But then when it comes to the user interface, you want that the real people who are interested in user engagement and user interaction to be evaluating that aspect of it, and also sort of iterating through it, putting user trials together and putting that in front of people. And that's part of what Storyboard allows us to do. Is as a product, you can get the right people doing the right things. You can get graphic designers and usability experts building the product, its front end, its user experience, and getting that trialed in front of end users to figure out what works and figure out what doesn't work, simply from an interaction model perspective, without even being coupled to the hardware, without being coupled to the full engineering system being available, because that user experience is really, really important.
Yeah, and both you and Jason touched on the hardware aspect of things. So another thing that would be good for to hear your thoughts on is from testing, initial testing, right down to deployment. How does Crank and Storyboard help validate your GUI on hardware, as well as perhaps scale or move to different platforms as the projects progress?
Yeah, I can certainly talk to that. A technology like Storyboard, because we already are, sort of, I don't want to say isolating, but allowing teams to work in parallel. We have an agnostic type of approach where the user interface that you're building isn't really tied to a particular operating system or hardware platform for its deployment. Really what it is it's a design system that allows you to build up your application, simulate it at the desktop level, get that user experience, then push it out to something like a tablet, push it out to a mobile device to be able to run your usability trials, and then take the same platform and then run it on your ultimate hardware platform. And that's great because it also allows you to sort of scale your product. You can have, sort of industrial strength applications. Maybe they need to be a little bit more hardened. Maybe they need a certain different price point. You can scale your product line along that way without having to reinvest in what the user interface is going to look like, right? So you can kind of build something that might be geared towards medical professionals, but then, in this type of scenario where maybe you need to scale production, right? Your production costs, are now a factor more significantly. Maybe you're going to drop a few features out of it. You want to rapidly adjust those user interface elements, but you're going to also look at targeting different hardware platforms to drive the whole system. It's important to be able to kind of spin that engineering effort around very, very quickly. And that's something that Storyboard helps you do.
Yeah, and you mentioned a really good point there. Industrial strength, right? Both Ventec and other organizations in the medtech space, they really deal with a different set of criteria and conditions that, say, a more mobile space or other industries would worry about. Jason, can you talk a little bit about sort of the constraints and the environment that medtech GUI development falls under? So perhaps to give some advice to what they could do this year.
The medical markets, it is very diverse as far as how far it expands, and it is rapidly growing to start blurring the edges between health and fitness apps and wearables markets. So there's lots of devices. In the past, medical devices have been sort of bigger, very expensive devices that have been in the back room, so they've been able to run any software they want. Sometimes they're even running desktop software. As we bring that forward to what's going on these days, there's a change is what's happening. It's much more competitive, these medical devices that are coming to market. They have to compete at the same levels. They have to provide that rich user interface that people are expecting and used to on their cell phones. They have to deal with the evolving hardware and how do they, get the right costs and find the right platform, especially as they start going to things like wearables, because you cannot, you need to actually be very cost sensitive and also resource and battery life sensitive when you start going to those markets. And at the same time, they're broad. The base of their users, it's no longer just trained professionals using these devices that the medical companies are making. It's really expanding inside of there because not only are the nurses and doctors and people in the operating room or wherever it might be have to use these devices, but then there's at-home medicine where people are taking these devices home and the average user has to use it. Then they're on the go people. The VOCSN is a great example of that, where their device can actually be used at home with people and can actually be carried because it's so nice and light. They can actually be used not only in a bed setting, but actually as somebody's being moved around or being transported or even just carrying it over their shoulder.
Right, and one final question for both of you as we're sort of wrapping up this interview here. Toma, from a technical perspective, can you give one recommendation for development teams to think about this year when they're either working on or starting a new project? And then Jason, I'll ask the same question for you, but from at a business level.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally would encourage teams to recognize the reality that UI design is never done. Right? That it is a very much an iterative process, that you start with an initial concept, but you need to absolutely get that in front of people and get feedback. And you should be expecting to change that. And if the change ramifications on the entire system are large and slow it down, then that's going to be a problem for you. So you want to make sure that the technologies you're choosing and the approaches that you're using for going into those technologies allow you to really separate out what's important about the user experience, the size of buttons, the layout of screens, the workflows that your end users are going to work through, and be prepared for surprises because surprises happen when you put technology in front of people. They use it in ways that you wouldn't necessarily expect when you're working at the drawing board level.
That's great. And then Jason, from your perspective, from a business leader perspective, what's the one piece of advice you would have for leaders to get the most success out of their teams this year?
Yeah, I would iterate what Toma said about understanding the iteration process, because people don't understand how much the UI iterates from different people's opinions and stuff. But then also you get into the business concerns about supply chain and different products and the evolution of technology as it moves so fast. At the upper level, MPU level processors, a lot of people are very used to using things like OpenGL and 3D technologies to accelerate and make their UI very rich and strong. But as you start going down and going to the MCU products, where some of the medical space is ending up, There's different rendering backends and technologies they need to be able to leverage very easily, and take advantage of as they try and bring down price points and costs. And so to get the most out of those technologies, you need a platform that really can scale and deal with those challenges as they move along.
Great. Well, thanks, Jason and Toma. I appreciate you sharing your insights with myself and our Embedded World audience. For anyone interested in checking out Crank Storyboard for themselves, you can try our free trial at cranksoftware.com. We also have a bunch of demo images where you can download samples that include medical and otherwise that you can try in your own hardware for yourself. Everyone, enjoy the rest of Embedded World.